What if the one thing you love the most was suddenly taken away from you? Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the dream you lived for every single day might never happen again. The ocean you once called home is now something you can only watch from a distance. The waves that once carried you forward are now just memories. This is the story of Sugar, a girl who didn't just love surfing, she lived for it. Every morning before the sun rose, while the world was still asleep, Sugar was already at the beach. The cold sand beneath her feet, the salty wind in her hair, and the endless ocean in front of her. That was her world. That was her freedom. People on the shore would stop and watch her ride the waves. To them, she looked fearless, like someone who belonged to the ocean. But everything changed in a single moment. At just 16 years old, Sugar received news that no teenager is ever ready to hear. A serious illness forced her away from the water she loved. The doctors told her recovery would be long, painful, and uncertain. Suddenly, the girl who once danced on the waves could barely stand on her own feet. Days in the ocean were replaced by days in a hospital bed. And every night, one painful question echoed in her mind. What if I never surf again? But this isn't just a story about illness. It's a story about courage, about falling down again and again, and still finding the strength to stand back up, because sometimes life hits you like the biggest wave you've ever seen. And in those moments, you only have two choices. Let the wave drown you, or learn how to ride it. The waves were roaring that morning. They crashed against the shore with a deep thunder, rising and falling like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. The salty wind rushed across the beach, carrying the smell of the sea and the sound of seagulls crying in the distance. The sun had just begun to rise, spreading golden light across the water. For most people standing on the beach, it was a beautiful morning. Surfers were stretching their arms, checking their boards, and watching the waves carefully. Some laughed with friends while others studied the water, waiting for the perfect moment to paddle out. But for Sugar, this morning felt very different. She stood quietly near the edge of the water, her surfboard resting in the sand beside her. The cold ocean waves rolled toward her feet and then pulled back again, as if inviting her to step forward. Yet she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the endless blue horizon, because today wasn't just about surfing. Today was about something much bigger. It was about proving that she was still the same girl who once belonged to the ocean. Just a few years earlier, Sugar's life had been simple and full of adventure. She had grown up near the beach, where the sound of waves was as normal as the sound of cars in a busy city. From the time she was a child, the ocean had been her playground. While other kids played in parks or stayed inside watching television, Sugar spent most of her time chasing waves. Her mornings often began before sunrise, when the beach was quiet and the water looked calm and mysterious. She loved that peaceful moment before the world woke up. Her father used to say that the ocean was a teacher. It rewarded patience and punished fear. Sugar listened carefully to every lesson the waves offered. By the age of 14, she was already one of the most talented young surfers in her area. People on the beach often stopped to watch her ride the waves. She moved across the water with confidence, balancing easily as if the ocean itself was guiding her. Surfing wasn't just a hobby for Sugar. It was her dream. She imagined herself competing in big surfing competitions one day. She dreamed of traveling to famous beaches around the world, riding waves that most surfers only saw in videos. Every wave she caught made that dream feel closer. But life has a strange way of changing everything when you least expect it. One afternoon, after returning home from school, Sugar began to feel unusually tired. At first, she ignored it. Surfing every day could make anyone feel exhausted. But the tiredness didn't go away. Days passed, and the feeling only grew stronger. Soon she started experiencing constant pain and dizziness. Even simple activities like walking or climbing stairs became difficult. Her parents grew worried and decided to take her to the hospital. At first, the doctors thought it might be something minor, maybe stress or a temporary illness. But after several tests, their expressions slowly became more serious. Sugar still remembered the quiet room where the doctor finally spoke to her and her parents. The news felt heavy, like a storm cloud suddenly covering a bright sky. She had been diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctor explained that treatment would take time. It would require medication, rest, and long period of recovery. For most teenagers, it would have been difficult news. But for Sugar, it felt like the world had suddenly stopped. Her first thought wasn't about school or friends. It was about the ocean. "What about surfing?" she asked quietly. The doctor paused before answering. "For now," he said gently, "you need to focus on getting better." Those words echoed in her mind long after they left the hospital. The next few months felt like a completely different life. Instead of waking up before sunrise to surf, Sugar woke up in a hospital bed. Instead of the sound of waves crashing on the shore, she heard the steady beeping of medical machines. The ocean that once felt so close now seemed very far away. Sometimes she would sit near the hospital window and look toward the distant horizon. If the weather was clear, she could almost imagine the waves rolling in like they always did. But imagining it wasn't the same as being there. Her body felt weak most of the time. Even standing for long periods became difficult. The strong and fearless surfer who once danced across the water now struggled with the simplest movements. Some days were especially hard. Doubt slowly crept into her thoughts. What if she never surfed again? What if the ocean became just a memory? Those questions were the most painful waves she had ever faced. Yet deep inside her heart, a small spark of hope refused to disappear. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still feel the board beneath her feet and the rush of the wave carrying her forward. That feeling reminded her who she really was. Sugar wasn't just a patient in a hospital. She was a surfer, and surfers know something important about waves. No matter how powerful a wave may be, it always passes eventually. One evening, as the sun was setting outside her hospital window, Sugar whispered something softly to herself. It was not a complaint. It was not a question. It was a promise. One day, I'll be back. She didn't know how long recovery would take. She didn't know how difficult the journey would be. But she knew one thing for certain. Just like the tide always returns to the shore, she would return to the ocean. Recovery didn't happen overnight. In fact, it felt painfully slow, like trying to move forward while the tide kept pulling you back. For Sugar, the days inside the hospital blended together. Morning turned into afternoon, afternoon into evening, and each day looked almost exactly the same. The bright hospital lights replaced the golden sunrise she used to watch from the beach. Instead of the sound of waves crashing against the shore, she heard the quiet hum of machines and the soft footsteps of nurses walking through the hallways. At first, Sugar tried to stay positive. She told herself that this was temporary, that one day she would return to the ocean just like before. But as the weeks turned into months, that hope began to feel fragile. Her body had changed. Before her illness, Sugar had been strong and energetic. She could paddle through heavy waves, balance on her board for long rides, and spend hours in the water without feeling tired. Now, even simple tasks felt exhausting. Some days she struggled just to sit up in bed. There were moments when frustration filled her mind. She hated feeling weak. She hated depending on others for things she used to do easily. And most of all, she hated the feeling that the ocean, the place where she once felt the most alive, was slowly drifting farther away from her. One afternoon, while watching the gray clouds through the hospital window, Sugar asked her mother a quiet question. "Do you think I'll ever surf again?" Her mother paused before answering. She didn't want to lie, but she also didn't want to crush her daughter's spirit. "I believe you will," she said gently, "but it might take time." Time. That word became Sugar's biggest challenge. Recovery required patience, something she had never truly understood before. The doctors explained that her body needed to rebuild strength step by step. Rushing the process could make things worse. So Sugar began her journey back to health the only way possible, one small step at a time. The first goal was simple: walking again. At first, even standing felt like climbing a mountain. Her legs trembled, and her balance felt uncertain. Nurses stayed close beside her in case she lost strength. The hospital hallway became her new training ground. The first time she managed to walk a few steps without stopping, it felt like a victory. It wasn't surfing, but it was progress. As the weeks passed, those small steps slowly turned into longer walks. Soon, Sugar began attending physical therapy sessions. The exercises were designed to rebuild her muscles, and improve her balance. Some of the movements reminded her of surfing training, stretching her arms, strengthening her legs, learning to control her center of gravity again. But the process was much harder than anything she had experienced before. Sometimes her muscles burned with exhaustion. Sometimes she felt like quitting halfway through. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered the ocean. She remembered the feeling of a wave lifting her board. That memory became her motivation. Her therapist noticed her determination. They could see something special in her attitude. Even on difficult days, Sugar refused to completely give up. Slowly, her body began responding to the training. Her legs grew stronger. Her balance improved. She could stand longer, move faster, and complete exercises that once seemed impossible. One day, during a therapy session, her trainer placed a balance board beneath her feet. It was designed to simulate the unstable surface of a surfboard. At first, Sugar wobbled awkwardly. Her body wasn't used to that movement anymore. But after a few tries, something amazing happened. Her instincts returned. Her feet adjusted automatically. Her arms moved naturally to maintain balance. For a moment, it felt like she was back on the water. The trainer smiled. "Looks like the surfer in you never left," he said. Those words stayed with her. Months later, after countless therapy sessions and long days of recovery, the doctors finally gave her encouraging news. Her health had improved enough for her to leave the hospital. But recovery wasn't over yet. She still needed to rebuild her strength completely. And there was one place where that final test would happen. The ocean. The day Sugar returned to the beach felt surreal. The familiar smell of salt filled the air. The sound of waves crashing against the shore felt louder than she remembered. Everything looked the same, but inside she felt different. A mix of excitement and fear filled her chest. What if she wasn't ready? What if her body couldn't handle the waves anymore? As she walked slowly across the sand, carrying her surfboard under one arm, memories rushed back. She remembered all the mornings she had spent here before sunrise. She remembered laughing with friends, chasing waves, and feeling completely free. But today felt like the first day all over again. When she finally reached the shoreline, she stopped. The cold water touched her feet. A wave rolled in gently, swirling around her ankles before pulling away. Sugar took a deep breath. Her heart was beating fast. For months she had imagined this moment. But now that it was finally here, doubt returned. What if she failed? What if she fell immediately? What if the illness had taken away the one thing she loved most? For a few seconds, she considered stepping back. But then she remembered something important. Every surfer knows that the ocean doesn't reward hesitation. To catch a wave, you have to paddle forward. Fear or no fear. So Sugar lifted her board, walked deeper into the water, and climbed onto it. The surface felt familiar beneath her hands. She began paddling slowly. Each movement felt careful and deliberate. The waves ahead weren't huge. They were small and gentle, perfect for someone returning after a long absence. Still, to Sugar, they looked enormous, because this wasn't just another surf session. This was the beginning of her comeback. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, and somewhere out there, a wave was waiting. All she had to do was find the courage to ride it again. The ocean was colder than Sugar remembered. As she paddled slowly across the surface of the water, a quiet tension filled her chest. The board moved gently beneath her, rising and falling with each small wave that passed. Everything felt familiar, yet strangely new. For months, she had imagined this moment, returning to the ocean, lying on her surfboard, waiting for the perfect wave. But imagination was different from reality. Reality came with uncertainty. Reality came with fear. Sugar looked toward the horizon where the waves were forming. They rolled toward the shore in steady lines, growing slightly taller before breaking into white foam. Before her illness, waves like these would have been easy for her. She would have paddled confidently, jumped up on her board in one smooth motion, and ridden the wave all the way to the beach. But today was different. Today, even the smallest wave felt like a challenge. Still, she kept paddling forward. The salty wind brushed across her face as she positioned herself where the waves began to rise. A few other surfers floated nearby, quietly watching the ocean and waiting for their turn. Some of them noticed Sugar. They could see that she was new, or perhaps returning after a long break. Her movements were slower, more careful than the others, but none of them said anything. Out in the ocean, surfers understood something important. Everyone had their own battle. Sugar's heart beat faster as the first promising wave began forming behind her. She turned her board toward the shore and started paddling. Her arms moved through the water, pushing hard as the wave approached. She could feel its energy building behind her, lifting the board slightly higher. "This is it," she whispered to herself. The moment came quickly. The wave pushed her forward, and Sugar placed her hands on the board, preparing to stand. Before her illness, this movement had been automatic. Her body knew exactly what to do. But this time, everything felt slower. Her arms pushed up, her feet tried to find their position. For one brief second, she almost stood up, then her balance slipped. The board tilted sideways, and suddenly she was underwater. The cold ocean swallowed her completely. Bubbles rushed past her face as she struggled to find her board again. When she finally surfaced, she gasped for air and grabbed the edge of the surfboard. For a moment, she just floated there. The wave had already passed. Her heart pounded as she climbed back onto board. From the beach, a few people had seen her fall. Inside her mind, doubt returned immediately. Maybe she wasn't ready. Maybe the doctors had been right. Maybe the ocean belonged to a different version of her now. For several seconds, Sugar simply sat on the board, staring at the water. The waves continued moving around her, completely unaware of the battle happening inside her mind. She could paddle back to shore right now. No one would blame her. After everything she had been through, even trying again was already brave. But then something unexpected happened. Sugar started laughing. It wasn't loud laughter, just a quiet, soft laugh that surprised even her. Because suddenly she realized something important. Falling into the ocean wasn't failure. It was part of surfing. Even the best surfers in the world wiped out sometimes. Waves were unpredictable. Balance could disappear in a second. Falling simply meant you were trying. And Sugar had waited far too long to stop trying now. She climbed back onto her board and paddled into position again. Another wave formed behind her. Once again, she turned toward the shore and paddled with all the strength she had. The wave lifted her board. She pushed up to stand. And once again, she fell. The second fall happened even faster than the first. This time, she surfaced quickly, brushing wet hair away from her face. A nearby surfer gave her a small, encouraging nod. It was a kind of silent support surfers often shared. Sugar smiled slightly and climbed back onto her board. Wave after wave came toward her, and wave after wave knocked her down. The third attempt ended with another splash. The fourth attempt lasted a little longer, but she still lost balance. Her arms grew tired from paddling. Her legs felt shaky each time she tried to stand. But something inside her had changed. Earlier, every fall had felt like proof that she might fail. Now, every fall felt like a lesson. She adjusted her position on the board. She watched how the waves moved. She paid attention to her balance, just like she had when she first learned surfing as a child. Little by little, her confidence began returning. Then came another wave. It wasn't the biggest wave of the day, but it rolled forward smoothly with just enough power. Sugar turned her board toward the shore again and paddled. Her arms cut through the water with determination. The wave lifted her board. She pushed up slowly. Her feet found their place. For a moment, the board wobbled slightly beneath her. Her arms stretched out for balance. And then she was standing. The feeling rushed through her like electricity. The board glided across the surface of the wave, carrying her forward. The ocean wind rushed past her face. For a few beautiful seconds, everything felt exactly the way it used to. The wave moved beneath her feet, steady and powerful. She wasn't thinking about illness. She wasn't thinking about the hospital. She wasn't thinking about the long months of recovery. She was just surfing. When the wave finally lost its strength near the shore, Sugar jumped off the board into the shallow water. She stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. Then a huge smile spread across her face. It hadn't been a long ride. It hadn't been perfect, but it was real, The ocean hadn't taken her dream away. It had simply been waiting for her to come back. Sugar grabbed her board and looked out at the waves again. There were hundreds more rolling toward the beach. And for the first time since her illness began, she felt something powerful inside her. Hope, because she realized something important. Her journey wasn't about avoiding the waves that knocked her down. It was about standing up again every single time. And today, she had taken the first real ride of her new life. The sun was beginning to climb higher in the sky, spreading warm light across the endless ocean. The waves continued to roll toward the shore, one after another, as if they had no beginning and no end. Sugar stood in the shallow water, holding her surfboard, breathing deeply as the cool ocean water swirled around her legs. Just moments ago, she had ridden her first wave since her illness. It hadn't been a perfect ride. She hadn't stayed on the wave for long, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that she had done it. After months of hospitals, pain, doubt, and recovery, she had stood on a surfboard again. For the first time in a long time, Sugar felt something she thought she might have lost forever. She felt like herself again. She looked out at the horizon where more waves were forming in the distance. The ocean was still powerful, still unpredictable, and still beautiful. But now, instead of fear, she felt determination. She climbed back onto her board and paddled out again. This time, her movements felt a little more confident. Her arms pushed through the water with stronger strokes. Her balance felt steadier as the board rose and fell with the rhythm of the sea. The first wave she tried after that ended in another fall. But this time, she didn't feel disappointed. She simply laughed, climbed back on the board, and paddled again. And that's how the rest of the morning continued. Wave after wave, attempt after attempt. Sometimes she fell. Sometimes she rode the wave for a few seconds. And sometimes she wiped out completely. But each attempt felt like progress. Each wave carried a lesson. Each fall reminded her that she was alive, fighting, and moving forward. When Sugar finally returned to the beach later that day, her arms were tired and her muscles ached. But her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Her parents were waiting near the shore. Her mother walked toward her with a proud smile. "You did it," she said softly. Sugar nodded. "Yeah," she replied, smiling. "I did." But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, Sugar returned to the ocean again and again. Some days were amazing. She would catch several waves in a row, feeling stronger and more confident each time. Other days were frustrating. The waves were rough, her balance fell off, and she spent more time falling than riding. But she never stopped coming back, because she had learned something important during her recovery. Life was a lot like surfing. Some waves were small and gentle. Others were powerful and overwhelming. Sometimes you caught the perfect ride, and sometimes the wave knocked you down before you even had a chance to stand. But the most important part wasn't the fall. The most important part was what you did after the fall. You climbed back onto the board. You paddled out again. You faced the next wave. That mindset slowly shaped Sugar into a stronger person, not just as a surfer, but as someone who understood perseverance in a deeper way. Months later, she entered a small local surfing competition. Standing on the beach that morning, she felt the same nervous excitement she had once felt before every competition. But this time, the feeling was different. Before her illness, winning had been her main goal. Now, simply being there felt like a victory. The competition began. Surfers paddled into waves, performing impressive rides and exciting maneuvers. When it was Sugar's turn, she paddled into the lineup with quiet focus. A wave approached. She paddled hard, stood up smoothly, and rode the wave toward the shore. The ride wasn't the longest or the most dramatic, but it was strong, controlled, and full of determination. When she stepped off the board, the people watching from the beach applauded. Some of them knew her story. Others simply saw a surfer riding with passion. Sugar didn't win the competition that day, but she didn't feel disappointed, because she had already won a much bigger battle. She had faced illness. She had faced fear. She had faced the possibility of losing the one thing she loved most, and she had fought her way back. As the sun began setting that evening, Sugar walked along the beach with her surfboard under her arm. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, reflecting beautifully across the water. The waves continued rolling in just as they always had. Sugar stopped for a moment and looked out at the ocean. She thought about the long journey that had brought her here, the hospital rooms, the slow recovery, the first painful steps, the many falls in the water. Every part of that journey had shaped her into the person she had become, a fighter, a dreamer, a surfer who understood that success wasn't about never falling. It was about standing up again after every fall. She placed her surfboard in the sand and sat down, watching the waves one more time. Some waves crashed loudly. Others rolled gently across the surface. But each one carried the same message. Keep moving forward. Sugar smiled to herself. Tomorrow there would be more waves, more challenges, more opportunities to grow stronger. And she was ready for all of it, because now she knew the secret that every surfer eventually learns. You don't conquer the ocean in one day. You face it one wave at a time. And just like life, you win the fight one wave at a time.